Welcome, everybody, to the Loud and Drunk podcast. This is Dan. Justin, we caught a little bit of flack a few episodes ago, and I still have a bee in my bonnet over it. I feel like we do a halfway decent job of punching at both sides. And if you're not, listening to the podcast and listening the whole way through, you're not going to pick up judging the podcast based on a title, based on a thumbnail. I get it. I'm doing my job and trying to get attention, but in what shape, way, or form are we not punching at both sides, buddy?
Well, yes, we got a little bit of flack, some expected flack, in my opinion, but we are here to serve it to all the ding-dongs in the world. And you know what? I think we might get some more flack on this one, just in a different flavor.
Yeah, because, the master of flack, Moses, we're going to be talking about something that's a little in your wheelhouse because you're named after a person of biblical notoriety.
And he never lets you forget it.
And you never let us forget it, but you actually went to Catholic school, right?
More or less. I started in Lutheran, but then progressed as the hierarchy of religion goes.
Myself, I'm just very happy to be here. Harry Butker, exciting day for me. I don't know a whole lot about religion, though I'm extremely pious. I think that God trumps all, though I try not to really let it govern my relationships. But obviously, I absolutely judge people based off of their, appetite for religion, the way in which they abide by the laws of God, the one true God. And just very excited. Moses, I'm very much so intrigued by your backstory. You went to religious school, you said.
Yes, we
Tell me about that.
We did it. We got out of class for it every first Thursday, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And, we got to drink the Jesus and eat the Jesus. And I love those goddamn crackers. Like, I want to get them just for like a party and just have like a bowl of Doritos, a bowl of Eucharist,
You got Doritos when you went to...
They did have Doritos too.
Okay.
That was in the...
I think he's saying he wants the Eucharist alongside of Doritos.
Yeah, like you have your Doritos, Tostitos, and then your Eucharist. It's just a little snack.
And the Eucharist is the body of Christ, am I correct?
Yeah, it's the symbolism of it.
Okay, yeah. All right, fair enough.
Yeah, they have that at the Mass, which is short for massacre.
Okay.
But it's...
Moving on from that little joke, it's nice to have the kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs on the podcast.
Thank you.
That's a nice
I'm glad that you recognized me. I didn't know I was invited here.
That's quite a topical.
I had no idea who that was.
Yeah. Up until.
Are you Taylor Swift?
I mean, if that's what you want me to be, baby.
Yeah, I see a use for you now.
Yeah.
Well, since we're on that topic, Mr. Butker.
Yeah.
You kind of riled some people up recently.
I did.
A lot for you.
A lot of people really misinterpreted what I was saying. What I was trying to say is that it's incredible that people are educating themselves, graduating, so on and so forth. I'm a big fan of education and what have you. And I think the greatest form of education that a woman specifically can have, when I look at the Bible and I look at the teachings of God and of Christ,
a roast.
It's exactly. Yeah, and I don't know if you're being facetious right now, but that's exactly it. And it's incredible that there are so many women out there who are, they're aspiring to be chemical engineers and doctors and what have you, but there is a higher calling out there. And that's what I was trying to say. I was trying to glorify women in that, the good book absolutely has told you what you need to do. And while you might be incredibly skilled with these other things, there is a higher calling, and it's kind of a know your place thing, but it's a know your place thing in a genuinely polite way. And it all comes from the book, from the good book. And I think that a lot of people misinterpreted that as being in some way misogynistic, being overly religious, my understanding is that this podcast today is going to focus a little bit on the religious right. I don't really know what that means. So I just don't think that you can be too religious is the thing. If you're abiding by the law of God, then how can you do that too much? And that's kind of how I approached it. And I think that I'm not sure what you're laughing at, especially since you're the only person.
He gets the giggles sometimes.
I get it. I get the giggles too. It's completely understandable. I don't judge you for that.
This is what God wants.
So what you ended up doing to get yourself in this little kerfuffle, is essentially speak about women.
Yes.
And they're, maybe they're going to go on to have careers, but maybe they should be a little bit more excited to have a family, be a mother and raise children. Now, the divide between what was going on with what you were saying is that the woke left was very angry because they thought you were just like, oh, stay barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen all the time.
Right.
But Christian conservatives were like, no.
He's on shoes.
Yeah, he's just saying, do exactly That's exactly the point, because men should be men and women should be women. Now, we're talking about two sides essentially of the same coin.
Sure.
The woke left has its own little dogmatic principles that it tries to authoritarianly put onto the population.
Absolutely.
But so has the Christian right.
Oh, yes.
I mean, and just to chime in on that, I did obviously notice that rebuttal that came from you describing them as the woke left, but merely people who disagree with me. I more or less am like, that's exactly what I call everybody who disagrees with me for the most part, and I think it's very accurate. As far as on my side of it, it's I definitely do not think that that women have to be barefoot and pregnant and so on and so forth. I don't think that it's some sort of a dogmatic thing that's built into stone and whatnot. I'm very proud of any woman who's able to do the things that men do, but that's really not your role. And that's kind of how I approach it, because the Bible makes that very clear. And so in this way, I'm extremely dogmatic about it. And I think that it really needs to be followed to the letter.
Okay, so since it's not dogmatic, but it is dogmatic, let's keep going.
Yeah.
Justin.
I just wanted to jump in and I saw what you said, and I think the point you were coming across is how society has kind of confused these women today.
Yeah.
It's really taking them away from
women
their,
are confused.
their
And exactly. Yeah. Women are confused. They don't know their place. I think that there's a lot of people in society, not just women, but there's all sorts of minorities that are not white Christian men that just don't really understand where they fit into this. And there's a lot of people who are trying to educate others. It's very complicated, because you do have that woke left that's trying to bring it in this other direction and tell people that they've got, rights that obviously the Bible
that's what
never
they're
made
doing.
clear.
All right. Let's
It's amazing. I didn't know really who you were 2 days ago, but now I do.
I just learned.
Let's bring it back in.
Yeah.
Christian conservatism, that is the other side to that coin.
It is.
It's very much like you have to do what we're going to tell you to do. And the way that it's kind of gone into the headlines these days is Christian nationalism.
Yes.
Now, Christian nationalism, we've had morons like Marjorie Taylor Greene go out in public and say that she's a Christian nationalist. If that's not going to revoke, of anyone of any real common sense, and then people, a little bit left of common sense.
I think like any particular movement, it is highly confused on what its own identity is.
Yeah.
It kind of falls into this kind of big pit of not really being descript at all. I mean, it has the religious aspect of it, of course, but any given person, particularly in politics, kind of sees it as anything that boosts them if they're looking for that particular boost. It's otherwise logic does not generally prevail because it's self-suited to any individual. But it is. So to give my own example here, I grew up in a religious family. I went to church every Sunday because it was my duty. I'm not saying I had the best time and I wasn't really all on board with it, but it was something that I thought as a child, this is what I do, and that's fine. I'm here to do it. And then I did it way too long. And I even went to what I call Christianity Light Church, which Presbyterian.
Yeah.
So you're a heathen.
Well,
Yes.
yes, I fully take
I just
that.
wanted to know where we stood. That's all.
That's fine. I am well below you, sir.
Well, a lot of Christian nationalism is based on Protestant.
No, yes, it is.
So, being Presbyterian is just a step below that.
But yeah, so what we have here in the States is, we're not going to make this a history podcast, but the dregs of what's left of Protestantism, big time, and all its varied masked faces. Because depending on where you are, there's a version for you. Well, if you're white.
And that's absolutely, and that's something that I look for as well. The color of your skin is so important when deciding upon your God. I'm glad that you acknowledge that.
Hey, I'm here for you, pal.
Thank you so
I
much.
love the Baptist church. Those are fun.
Yeah.
At least they got some flair.
Yeah,
They are fun.
singing and dancing.
Heathenistic, but fun.
But if we're going to... So with what is often broad spectrum into the religious right, pretty much conservatism is been a long time tied with religious aspects, particularly Protestantism, waspiness, if you will. Like I said, I'm Christianity Light was the way I was brought up, and I still didn't really gel with it. But as I am today, I mean, I didn't get touched, thankfully. I don't know about Moses. He went to one of those.
That's gotta hurt too, though. I feel like not.
They didn't touch me.
If you're a member, we'll circle back to that as well. Yeah. But I feel like if you're a young person, you're a member of a choir or something like that at a Catholic church.
No, they kicked me out of the choir.
You see these like headlines, and it's like you look at a church that maybe you belong to, and there was 6, 7, 8, 9 kids that were getting diddled there by the various different higher members of the church, and you weren't one of them. That's really got to like instill a certain level of insecurity in you. I mean, what's wrong with me that I wasn't the one getting diddled? Am I not?
God, we're a little early in the podcast for these jokes to be.
It's not a joke. It's a legitimate question.
But so there's an intrinsic thing that exists on the right-hand side where it's like you have it very tied into, it's like God, guns, and country. And like it's been around for a long, long time. And it's like it's not a surprise to any of us. I kind of grew up with like knowing that existed. I grew up around a lot of people like that. In fact, more of those people than on the much louder, more obnoxious left side now. But like I'm not giving the right a pass. This is insanity. It's like I don't want, for me, Justin here, I don't want church. You believe in God. My big problem is churches. I think there are control aspects, blah, 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 blah. And like we can get into this and it's probably very boring. I don't need that with my government. I don't need religious control in my government.
That reminds me of a story, my Navy days. I went to community college down in Virginia, Tidewater Community College, and one of my classes was public speaking. And I think it was a chief, went up there and did his speech. And it was about how, now I might butcher this, it's been 20-something years. He went up there and I think the thesis of what his speech was supposed to be is that Christianity should be the official religion of the United States.
Yeah.
And I immediately rose my hand. I'm like, you can't do that. It's in the First Amendment.
That's kind of the opposite.
Yeah, it doesn't say, and his response was, it doesn't say anywhere in the Constitution that there's a separation of church and state. And I'm like, it's in the First Amendment.
Yeah.
It's literally the first line of the First Amendment that the government cannot establish an official religion.
It's kind of one of the tenets of why.
Isn't it on the dollar bill? I mean, it's also there with the God we trust, but still.
Well, that was added much later.
Yeah.
That
was added something like 150 years later, yeah.
So the idea that you want to establish a Christian nation,
right,
based on that idea is, first of all, you are 100% right, that it goes against what the country was established on. But also, my question to you and anyone else that thinks that, why?
Yeah.
Why would you want the corrupting agent? We just talked about this in the libertarian episode. Why would you want the corrupting agent of the government involved in your church? And why would you want it the other way around? What did you say, Moses?
Government knows best.
Government knows best.
He wasn't here for that
the
episode.
conflicting nature of the two.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
government knows best or God knows best.
Right.
So that's it. So I'll chime in on that then. I think that that's exactly it. It's that obviously people as a society desire, and I know that they don't like consciously desire it, but to some degree, subconsciously perhaps, or perhaps because of the necessity, desire some sort of an overarching system that keeps us all in line.
Yeah.
Right. We need rules.
Yeah.
You know, I think that for the most part, people will agree with that.
It's like a human need.
Yeah.
So we need some sort of a rule system, and now you're left with it seems to be something of a dichotomy. You either need, or it's almost a bipolar nature to it. You have like this religious aspect where the rule comes from above, from God, or it comes from a group of people, that's your government, and they create the rules because it's a meritocracy and they're so smart and so on and so forth. And no matter which one of these two things you choose, you're going to be very unhappy with the results.
But I would argue, I'm sorry to cut you off.
Not at all.
When you combine both of them together, you get the worst possible outcome. Because you're going to have the government in there, and you're going to have the religious aspect in there, and the dogma is already baked into the religious.
Oh, so then let me counter you on that one. So I would agree with you at base value, but this is exactly why I think we're getting very close to it being just right today, because that would have been true for a long period of American history where the founding fathers did indeed separate church and state. But I think that the reason that that's not true today, where you've got the government doing this and now the church gets involved, or or the church is there and the government gets involved. What makes it so perfect today is that we have elected leaders who are very much so about the church, and they abide by the law of God, the only true law.
You are absolutely right.
Yeah, they're all about that on both sides. And honestly, while obviously I have my politics and I'm not going to bring them onto this podcast, but I will say that it's wonderful for me to look at it today because you've got both sides, and both of them are very Christian. They believe in Christian values. They believe in the word of our Lord. They believe in the Bible. Obviously, everybody's putting their hand on the good book.
I don't think you're Harry Potter.
I plead the fifth.
This is the opposite of what he said at that commencement speech.
It has very much been allowed to happen. And because this country is built off of that prudent nature of for escaping from Europe into the early days of this country and stuff like that for religious freedom, but that would become the religious kind of
we just live long enough to become the villain.
Yeah, and the short history lesson there is that indeed this country obviously broke away. Its founding was breaking away from a monarchy in Europe, where all of Europe was made up of individual monarchies, which were deeply tied to their various varieties of Christian churches, most of them tied to the Pope in some way, shape, or form. But regardless, abiding by some sort of a Christian church, this country, the founding fathers, for all of their flaws, very much so made a choice to break away from that. And it is very interesting that we're finding our way back to that today, or at least trying to look to that as being that's our roots. And it really isn't. It's exactly what we were breaking away from. It's the opposite.
What religion was that painting of Charles? Did you see that? There's this
painting of Charles?
King Charles. It's a big portrait, and it's hidden. It's him, but it's under so much fucking red.
You're talking modern day. The thing that just happened.
Oh yeah. No, not that King Charles.
Like a fucking painting that's supposed to be in what almost looks like Vigo the Carpathian.
Kinda. Yeah, it looks like it's out of Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's just
it should have been featured in Dante's Inferno.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It's bizarre looking.
Yeah.
What I will say is that I have no fight with a person that's Christian, and we'll leave it at that, or conservative, and we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
But once you mix the two together, and
it
gets weird.
Yeah.
Because then you're trying to essentially usher in a Christian theocracy into personally, I don't want this country to be anything close to what the Middle East is like, where it's
theocracy.
It's a theocracy where you have it's a very totalitarian Islam regime, and here being in a totalitarian Christian regime is no better. Just because there are things about the teachings of the Bible that could be useful doesn't mean that you're, first of all, interpreting them
right.
And second of all, that they're also going to be helpful when you're in that position when most of the people in government are sociopathic. They're going to interpret the Bible or whatever religion they want in a way that's going to be prudent for them to use in terms of gaining more power.
Well, I would say that first of all, in terms of interpreting the good book in one way or another, that's just people who choose to seek higher ranks within any given government, especially this one. I think that these are people who, if they can speak about the Bible clearly and what have you, these are obviously people who have good merit. And so I think that that's something that, as opposed to what?
It's not them just playing the game?
No.
Learning it to say it.
That's some sort of a
red state.
Some sort of a secular person who has no morality, because obviously without Christianity,
morality cannot exist.
Without Christianity, you really have no morality. And I look at the people of this world, the small minority of people who are not Americans, the 95% of this planet that are not Americans, and I look at them with pity.
Aren't they though?
Yeah, well, they don't appreciate the value of our values, and I think that's the key takeaway there. That said, I think that what we should really be looking to is what can we take away from this book? What are we not taking away from this book, and then applying to our lives every single day? How can we look at these phrases, these quotes from a book that was written realistically, the New Testament, this is based off of the Old Testament, so you're talking about a book, a literature.
New Testament, 3rd, 4th century.
Yeah, exactly. We're talking about thousands years old. So what can we take away from this misquoted and arbitrary verbiage, and then misquote it and apply it to our own lives every single day, and then make them into laws that we all have to abide by? And if we could just do that a little bit more than what we're doing, then I think we would figure it out.
We're onto something.
We're kind of half-assing that,
I need more rules in my
Yeah, and that's just it.
Yeah, I need the government inside the church. I need the church
Bingo.
inside
That's
the
what I'm
government.
saying. Yeah. We've been like only a little bit. We've been like half on the gas, and we need to go full. And then it becomes clear.
But oh wow, okay, clear, yeah.
Which religion do we go full metal?
I'm sticking with Christianity. I'm not sure where to go.
That's actually an important question in the Christian nationalist idea.
It is.
Because, you brought up being Baptist before.
Well, yeah.
Oh, I'm not Baptist. I just like their church.
No,
Baptist.
it's just you brought it up.
Yeah.
So
The Catholics of the South.
would they be involved? Would they be included? Because, a lot of these denominations that look
Tent revivals,
Sounds like they'd be
snake charmers,
No.
of all the different ilks, they're in. Yeah, I mean, it's so many different flavors, like Baskin Robbins here. What are we going to do?
Just to chime in on that once again, I think that it would work exactly the way that it's always worked, which is that as long as there's another group that definitely doesn't get it, and you've got Hindus and Buddhists and Taoists and so on and so forth, as long as they exist, then we can absolutely all join together as Christians. And we can have something and we can make it work and what have you. But once we've eradicated these other things, and maybe that's a strong word, I mean it, but like maybe it's not the word that I wanted to use, but let's be real. Once we've eradicated them, then I think that that's the perfect time to turn on ourselves and really look at these weaker versions of Christianity. I think that that's what it is, because some of us are obviously playing by the rules.
I think you're underestimating how quickly the turn will happen. It will not be like, oh, let's wipe out the Buddhists and the Hindus. No, those Baptists.
I'm not saying wipe out, Dan. I said eradicate. Yeah. Don't do that. Yeah, absolutely.
Makes me think of the first 15 minutes of Gangs of New York.
Yeah. It's a great movie.
The war for the five corners or the five fingers, whatever it's called in that particular movie.
5 points.
5 points, yeah. Oh, man. Oh, yeah, those Protestants and those Catholics. Oil and water, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that begs the question, who's the one that's going to make the decision? Like, which religion is a part of...
That's the funny thing. So, like, if you're going to talk about the United States as a unified fucking thing, it's like in the Northeast, you got Catholics up your ass. If you're going to go down to, like, the South, Baptists, like, all over the place. Then you got Lutherans, your Methodists, your Presbyterians ain't going to do much of anything. But, like, and that's just Christian.
Those Santeria folks.
Yeah.
And to add on to that, it's that when you extrapolate that a little bit further, Jews, Christians, and Muslims all believe in the same God.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's 100% the same religion. These are just different sects that are split up into this trio. Essentially. Really do believe the same thing.
What's the way you pronounce it? But like the Abraham base.
Yeah.
Abrahamic religions,
Coming from the Semitic part of the world.
Yeah.
And it's,
You decide that, the question that you're asking, Dan, you do that in the same way as you do when you're looking at Jews or Muslim people or Christians. You look at them and you go, two of these groups don't believe in the right God. And that's how you know that they're wrong.
And then you can, subdivide that down and be like, well, the Methodists, they don't believe in the right God.
Exactly. And that's what I'm saying. There's a right God, and I know what that right God is. And obviously, and other people who are righteous like myself very much so know what that is. And then at that point, it comes down to that you can make friends for a little while because we all have similar goals, taking care of these other people. Not the way that you worded it, Dan. That sounded very aggressive. I'm not about that.
Are you petitioning to be this Christian prince that's...
I'm not petitioning to do anything, but I am willing to take a nomination if you're offering that.
I am not.
But merely that for all of us, that we know, we all believe that we've got the right angle, that we've figured it out, that our God is the right God, so on and so forth. And that you could extrapolate that as far as you want. It could be within Christianity. It could be the Abrahamic religion, so on and so forth. You could take it further and just say global religions for everybody. But the bottom line is that you really need to have your faith. That's when God is testing you the most. When he, kind of shows you.
I was told that so often in my childhood.
When God shows you something like a Hinduism, various different sects, or Zen Buddhism, or Taoism, and it's like, oh my God, this makes so much more sense than Christianity does. Like, why am I believing in one God and so on and so forth? That's God testing you, right? That's God testing you right there. Because what he wants you to believe in is something that's completely ridiculous. And then he offers you this thing that actually really makes a lot of practical sense in the world. And you need to have the strength and the faith to say, you know what? I don't believe in that. And not only do I not believe in that, but that I'm willing to go and shut people down if they believe in that religion. And that's the power of Christianity, of true faith. And so I think that when we look at this, it really does just come back to that us as individuals, we really need to look around and we apply that same reasoning no matter how small the group. And basically, we look at it within the framework of, do I believe in this particular God? And if somebody else doesn't, what am I willing to do to stop them?
You'd be a great pope.
That's right. What am I willing to do to stop them? And especially if you...
It keeps going.
No,
Yeah,
he's gunning for the Christian prince thing. He doesn't want the Pope. He's trying to usurp the Pope.
Listen, it's just Harry here.
This is a religious podcast, right?
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Whoa.
You can stop.
I didn't know there was going to be blasphemy here.
You didn't?
I do not take the Lord's name in vain.
You're like one of the commenters. You haven't listened to a second podcast.
When I use it, I get risen.
When I got the invitation, I was very confused.
Right. So it's like, here's something that I notice every day in my life. Because for me personally, like, if you want to worship God or whatever that means to you, all about it. Like, do whatever you want to do. That's your thing to do.
Amen.
Yes, sure. My problems largely lie with, like, the organized religion aspect.
Yes.
I find those to be, like, control aspects. You look through, just look through history in any corner of the world for any religion that exists in that corner of the world. One of the most obvious ones that you generally are taught in history is, like, Henry VIII. He couldn't get a divorce, so he shut all of England off from the Catholic Church, and now we're our own new thing. That's why I don't like religion.
Yeah. The reason that I don't particularly like religion is
Got a
because...
baller song.
What?
Henry VIII.
I know. Leave it.
The reason I don't particularly care for religion is because one of the things that I was alluding to before, there's actually things of value in those stories, and a lot of the stories that are in any religion that can help you with your life. Like, I'll use the example of Noah and the whale.
Yeah.
Where he's...
Jonah.
Jonah, thank you.
Yeah.
Jonah and the
Yeah.
whale. So he's eaten by the whale, but before that, he's given a task that, like, hey, you're going to go over to... I forget what...
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
But you're supposed to go over there and tell them all the reasons that they're doing something wrong.
The mascara.
Now we're talking more like Aesop's fables.
That's where Wonder Woman's from.
And then Jonah's like pretty much to God, like, I'm not going to do that. I'm a foreigner in their country. That's not gonna go well. So he runs away, goes onto the boat.
Yes.
And the allegory to all of that is that
You could run away from God.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's a fucking story. Like,
He's very busy.
It's
Not then. There were that many people.
it's like any ancient Greek tale. It's
Yes.
like, why did you do that? Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But like, he's trying to just like get away from it, and then like the storms are freaking raging, and all the sailors, I don't know because I don't know this.
No, you wouldn't.
All the sailors knew that somebody on the ship wasn't right with God.
Yes.
And so he falls, like, at one point he tells them, like, you know what, I'm the one that's not right, and fucking shuck him, and he gets eaten by the goddamn whale.
Yeah.
And the moral of that story is that when you're called upon to tell the truth,
Yes.
do it.
Right.
Instead of it, like, no, he literally got eaten by a whale,
Yeah.
which is one of the dumbest ways that you could actually interpret that story.
Literal interpretation.
A literal interpretation. It's a historical event. It's a collection of fables and stories to help you guide your life, as long as you're not a fucking moron.
I think that that's interesting because when you look back at the pre-Abrahamic religions, then you've got polytheistic religions for the most part. And I find those very interesting because they're multitude of gods.
It's not even a multitude.
Yeah.
It's like an
It was
infinite.
almost
amount.
infinite. Yeah, because the gods were routine. Basically, those gods, they were unique entities that existed somewheres between what we might call heaven and this planet Earth.
Yeah.
And they were definitely immortal. There were some things that could kill them, but they were basically immortal.
Aspects,
Yeah, there were like
Yeah.
the main ones, and then there were offshoots of those.
Well, they had
principles.
children because all of those gods. The bottom line is that they were.
Oh, so it's like the fuck a lot.
They acted like people, and they were capable of being harmed.
Yeah.
And they routinely had squabbles with each other, and so on and so forth. And it's very interesting when you get to the first of the Abrahamic religions, where you get to Judaism, and before that it was Zoroastrianism.
Yes. Yeah.
Then obviously the other two shut off of that. Yeah. But you have this God that's just omnipotent, and he's also supposed to be perfect in many ways, and it's
infallible.
He's infallible, and it raises these other questions of like, basically, if you look back at antiquity and it's like, why did this bad thing happen to me? It's like, oh, because Zeus is a piece of shit. He just fucked him over today. And it's pretty straightforward. If you really want to, you can go and sacrifice a sheep, and maybe he'll be nice to you tomorrow. But it's a big maybe. The guy's a dick. So it was very practical in that your gods were very powerful entities, but you had to
fickle.
interact. Yeah, and you had to interact with them the way that you would interact with
Like chaos.
Yeah, more or less like anybody else, you know? Whereas when you have an Abrahamic God, you've got an entity that is so perfect that it's a very different interaction.
Oh, it's perfect. It's divine plan. It's like everything is as it should be.
Yeah.
And
So then why am I doing things wrong?
Right.
Essentially becomes the question.
Right.
What am I fucking up?
yeah, no, and it's the human mind wants to have something to shove in there when they can't figure something out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody wants things to be black and white when in fact they're gray.
I think there's a term for that. Isn't it like the God hole or whatever?
Yes.
It's like
Yeah.
you-
in a way.
That's a different thing.
I'm pretty sure it's called at least something close
Yeah,
to that.
That's where I go every Sunday.
Yeah.
But
Well, I mean,
Praise
that's a
be his glory hole.
Oh, never. I misspoke. Sorry.
as human beings, we are inquisitive creatures. When we cannot get an answer, we have a hard time accepting that we cannot put something there, so we need to put something there.
Yeah.
And that offers a lot of comfort.
And
And like,
creates new discomfort.
well, yes, I mean,
It does ramp up some anxieties.
but like these things have existed for the better part of what we can actually like trace and record. So like sub 12,000 years ago, we're always trying to quantify why the world does to it what it does, what does to us what it does.
To bring it back to the role of the Christian right in this society, what is everybody's thoughts about the general concept of, I mean, we kind of addressed it before, the overall notion of the Christian right being, and it's like quantify that as being, you know, basically more people who are more religious, zealotous perhaps,
Mhm.
and their role in government and what have you. Because I think everybody kind of voiced that they were opposed to that. Obviously, I'm very much so in favor of it because I believe in it.
Yeah, no, we picked up on that.
As far as the role that it has today, though, I think that that's very distinct from, I'm 38 years old, so it's like, and I think we're, for the most part, we're all in the same
More or less,
bracket
yeah.
in this room, that it's very different today than it was, let's say, 40 years ago.
Absolutely.
It's very different. Is there any positive to that?
A positive to bringing these
Weeds
people-
better.
Bringing.
I don't think that was the scope of it.
No.
Well, I'm just giving examples.
In terms of just a religious aspect, is it?
Yeah, has there been any positive impact of the, you know, so-called religious right, or let's just say,
Oh, a positive aspect that they've brought, or a positive because my positive was that they've lost power since like 40 years ago. They
Yeah.
had substantially more power back then.
okay, so fair enough. And to clarify my own point, because I'm very intrigued by that, has the religious right or religion having a greater role in government, is there something tangible that you've noticed in your, you know, regular everyday life, whatever, or just observation?
No, I don't think
No.
there would be anything that would. You would like to believe that if if our leaders were religious, that it would guide them and make them better people. We all know that not to be the case because the people
I
who
don't
go to those positions are sociopathic. You have to be in order to want that.
My opinion is that if you're in politics and you're playing the religion game, it's a game. You are pandering.
It's the same thing I would say.
And I do believe there are true believers,
Yeah, absolutely.
but they know very well that they are trying to drum up a specific part.
They're trying to play
Yes.
to the Christian base
Yes.
that they know that they have.
Yes.
It's the same basic principle that if you're a Democrat, you're going to play to the woke base because you think that's your voting base. When there's probably in both voting pools more moderates than anything else, but the two
Well, the
opposite
moderates
ends
are the most quiet.
Yeah, they're the quiet
Yeah.
ones, and the ones that are on the extremes are obviously the loud ones.
Look, so Trump's first presidency, leading into that, the hoops that religious sects had to go through to try to quantify what he is.
Well, he made Pence his vice president.
Yes, well,
to,
well, yeah,
like,
yeah,
kind
yes.
of reach out to them.
Exactly
I'm going
right.
to bring,
Yeah.
because it was like a baffling idea. Like, why would you make Pence your vice president? Oh, that's right. Christians don't actually like you.
Right.
Because you were a millionaire, billionaire playboy for the majority of your life. You were also a Democrat for the majority
Yes,
of your
yeah.
I don't see how that's important.
For myself, it's that I see such an extreme disconnect. I'm a fierce believer in the Bible. I think that it's very much so literal. I think we can interpret it more or less like word for word. And so then when I look
Version.
Well, the King James.
Obviously, it's the King James.
That one rolls the best.
For finishing my sentences for me.
It's the best.
Yeah, when you're rolling a joint. Because I've had some of those other kinds.
I don't share in his proclivities. Yeah.
You were in the
If my
same
wife
room when it happened.
listening, I do not smoke weed with
You were in the same room. You were asleep, but you were in the same room when it happened.
I don't think you are Harry Butker. Then you don't like you're a kicker for the Kansas City.
Are you
Chiefs.
really hung up on this? I'm
He's just doing this to get Taylor Swift to make a song about him.
When
don't think they-
when I look at it, myself,
Wasn't she
despite
on
being a devout Christian, I look at the situation that we have today, and I observe it, and very much so in the vein of Richard Nixon, that the infiltration of the extreme pietist religious right actually harms a lot of the belief systems that I have, certainly, in Christianity. When I look at Christianity, one of the things that differentiates it from its predecessors, namely Judaism, is it's the turn the other cheek notion, and so on and so forth. There's a myriad of lessons here to be learned from early textbooks in Christianity, and I don't see them exercised by the modern political apparatus. Please.
I think that the actual interpretation of turn the other cheek is kiss my ass.
I would agree with you, and that's what I've been trying to do to you for this entire evening.
Kiss my ass?
Yeah.
I think you've just been kissing the ass of this podcast just in the wrong way.
Yeah, that's fair. What's the right way?
You have to go counterclockwise.
Oh.
With the tongue.
Well.
Yeah, we'll save that for the Patreon.
Yeah.
So
I think
We gotta get that one active.
yeah,
the
I'm working on it.
Can we do an OnlyFans?
No, that's a different thing.
I think it could be anything you want.
No one wants to see your grundle.
people
yeah, that's
people in politics abuse the general notion of religion, do not abide by it, and more or less exploit it, which I think is kind of what was alluded to before.
Yeah, and it's universal. It's across every
Oh,
country
yeah.
and every religion.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
We have a specific taste here in America, but this is a universal worldwide thing.
Yeah.
It is inescapable.
epidemic.
Yeah. Well, it's like one of my favorite things, and I've probably told this to you guys before. One of my favorite things in studying Islam many years ago is that shortly.
Now you're definitely
don't
not
think
Harry
he's that
Butker.
kicker.
Yeah, you studied Islam. That's
He's in and out of character.
I'm sorry, I can't be an athlete and also
No, I think
study.
he just changed
Dan, you
religions.
need to check your stereotypes, sir.
you're an athlete that went to class. I don't believe it.
Yeah, no, it's a thing. It's a thing. I study every day.
It's
a school of hard
continue,
knocks.
sir. Continue.
So in early Islam, at this point, it's just an offshoot of Christianity.
Yes.
And so more or less they're having, and we're like about maybe 300 years in, so long after the death of Muhammad, and you've got a meeting of the ulama, and it's basically just like your fancy fucking people, you're the equivalent of the priests, they're all meeting up to go over the rules and what have you.
It's a class.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're meeting up to go over the rules, paint out the new Bible, the new textbook, and so on and so forth. And the story from that is more or less that you've got Hanbal there, and he's just chilling out. They're walking around offering food. Somebody offers him watermelon. He says no. And they go, what the fuck is wrong with you? And he goes, why the fuck would I want that? They say, everybody else is eating it. What's the problem? He goes, well, nowhere in the Quran does it say that you're supposed to eat watermelon. His interpretation of it was so literal that not only did he need for it to not, so like basically say that you weren't supposed to do it, but so fucking clear for him that it needed to really spell out that you had to do this one thing. That's the ultra literal interpretation of the thing. That you need this book that which was written, 1,000 years ago, 2,000, go back as far as you want to, that it needs to say exactly how you're supposed to live your life every single day and use the exact words. In this case, it was watermelon, and obviously that's, to me, that's not how that's supposed to be interpreted. It was, it was just like,
It's
just not how.
So you're giving an example from like essentially 1,1500 years ago.
Yeah.
Whereas we have today, they are the punching bag and they rightfully should be, but like say like the Westboro Baptist Church.
Yeah.
And they are an interpretary religion interpreting the text in a modern world, and they bend it to their will in some of the most hilarious ways, I think.
Yeah. You can make the text say whatever you want.
Exactly, right.
You can be hyper literal with it, in which case, presumably, there's a flaw in there because just time has passed, and your interpretation of literal has no real relevance.
No, it doesn't. Doesn't.
We can both read the same
And
thing
it's
right now.
whose interpretation and how do they spin it?
Exactly, yeah. So, and really, then you go back to that problem of that you need rational people to be observing it. That therein lies the issue.
But there's no such thing as a rational person.
I would agree with that, yeah. Which is why I look to God.
He's the only one you got.
Yeah.
So, Justin, you were saying this isn't going to be a history podcast, right? All right. There was a lot of history there.
That's why I'm not pushing it forward by adding things.
Yeah. Dan can edit that out.
Oh, good. More editing.
It's a pandering morality game.
Yeah.
And it's
nobody
there's
wants
so
to
many
take
different- there's so many
responsibility.
different camps, and like you can have, because like even if you just say Christianity as a whole, like that's fine in the most vaguest of ways. But you try to get any one of them to try to communicate with each other, like you try to get a Baptist and a Catholic to talk to each other. God forbid.
You run into no matter how you approach it, you run into the same fundamental problems, which is why these things evolved in the first place. It's the whole reason that you end up with these particular religions or with any religion is that you're trying to answer fundamental questions that don't have black and white answers. Look at the abortion debate in American politics today.
No, that's one of the big ones.
That's
Yes.
probably the biggest one. You know, is abortion okay or not? And you've got one side that's dug its heels in because it's politically advantageous, and they think, and they're not that they think, but that they will purport that all abortion is wrong. You know, like you could get fucking, gang banged on the street and you have to pop out those kids, or in the opposite direction. And it doesn't deal with the situations that individual people have.
If I can just interject real quick,
Yeah.
I'm going to say my piece. It's the fucking hypocrisy of it all. It's so many people, largely the most front-facing to the public, pious people that end up being brought down by the most heinous shit. And I'm sorry, but it's the hypocrisy. Like, look at your Joel Olsteins, your prosperity fucking religious folks.
Good man.
When that shit happened down in Texas, and the flooding from that hurricane.
He wasn't there.
And shutting off his arena church from housing anybody. You know what I mean?
He's out of town, so why would he keep that on? He's saving up. The electric bills were probably crazy there.
I think that might be the greatest example of what irks me.
What irks me about it is, as I said before, it's the dogma.
Yeah.
And a big part of, pushing the dogma too, and pretty much an example I think you were kind of alluding to as well with the Joel Osteen thing is, there's an aspect of a religion that gets even darker than what we're talking about here with Christian conservatism, Christian nationalism, and that's cultism.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
When you're in a cult, it's essentially you're cut off from everything. A good example, and we're totally not going to get assassinated by people out in LA for this, Scientology.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yep.
Ask, what's her name? Leah Remini?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. I mean, they let her put that thing on Hulu, so.
Yeah, so I think we should be safe, although they really do go after her, quite a good deal.
But she's still alive.
She's still alive, but people don't know who we are.
I'm just going to say this, and I'm here for it. I listened to another very small podcast who had their own problems with the Church of Scientology because that's what they do. Anybody says nay against them, no matter how big or small, they go after.
Well, then let's go big. Isn't that just an offshoot of Illuminati?
Well, we'll go as big as we can.
Scientology
for the
is
Opus Dei,
interesting because it's of the weird cultist things. It seems to exist because of the wealth that it controls and doesn't have a good backbone.
It's like the most bananas kind of religious MLM in existence.
Yeah. It feels very unique to me.
Yeah.
It's so bananas, it makes Mormonism, which has a really...
That's all out of...
How dare you call them? You can't call them that anymore. They are members of the LDS.
Yeah.
So they're a gang?
I give no one a pass. Regular LDS people are just well-meaning, gullible. They were brought up in it. The RLDS, fuck them.
Well, that's it.
I don't respect Mormons' pronouns, so I'm going to go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know. What is this?
The Latter-day Saints.
Well, the Latter-day Saints. What's the RLDS?
They're the ones that believe in impregnating kids and having a whole
to add to that, though, and just to tie it back into the previous conversation for this podcast, it's that within every one of these groups that was discussed, there is an extreme, because basically whenever you're talking about something, there's a plane of it, and so they, basically those on the extreme side of it they exist within all religions, and that's what I find so fascinating. So in other words, Mormonism by itself, I do think that the origination of that that religion, from what I've read about it, is a little silly. I'll be honest. I don't think that Christ was here on this continent, and I don't think that he dug up books or whatever
and John Smith.
It was John Smith dug up.
I think
and John Smith was bananas, and Brigham Young really turned it up a notch.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's a scam. You know, I don't necessarily believe that the Red Sea was parted. I don't think that an illiterate Muhammad, wandered his way up to a cave and say these are fictitious stories that are meant to educate people and to help them in their journey. Christ was real.
Go ahead and say though, I don't know what Scientology's offering in their.
No.
Any sort of merit to it. Like I'll give the devil his due.
Well,
the Bible's got some fables in there that serve some sort of merit that pretty much were ripped off as as you were saying before, Zoroastrian and all that other thing. But Scientology and also the Church of Latter-day Saints, what their stories are like, they don't really have a moral that you take away from. Like obviously they have a way of saying like, all right, this is how you go and be a good person.
They have rules but no morals.
Yeah, that's the antithesis of what all the other religions were trying to establish.
This is what I'll say. I'll play counterpoint to that.
Yes.
Is that I agree with you, but all of these things, if you look at them within that framework, if you apply that same judgment to all of the other religions, then you'll find the same thing, is that what they really did, it wasn't, so in other words, look past the morality and things like that. You're looking for some sort of a personal betterment. And I would say that that's not really what these religions were doing in the first place. What they were doing is offering you a tangible benefit. The reason that Islam evolved out of Christianity is because Christianity was failing in very practical ways at that time.
Big time. Big time.
There was people who wanted different taxation, different rights, and so on and so forth. So I think that when you look at something like Scientology, and I feel like rather disgusting defending it right now, but when you look at that, it offers benefits. And that's what it is. It offers benefits to those who choose to do it.
Exactly.
And that's what religions do. That's the most important thing, because if you don't benefit the people who choose to be members, then they won't be members for very long. Human membership in a religion is it needs to be practical.
That's when you're a cult, you're not really providing any benefits anymore.
At first, you need to at least offer it.
It seems like you're getting a benefit, but then slowly but surely, you are losing more and more of your individual autonomy.
I would agree.
You're losing your ability to. You can't even leave where you're supposed to be, which was something that Leah Remini, I believe, encountered. You're not even supposed to leave, like, whatever the hell they call it, the frickin' camp.
The compound,
They overpromise and undersell. I would definitely agree with that as far as,
It's also a thing of you get so deep that getting out is damn near impossible.
Yeah. And this I would argue would be like one of the ways that you could say, like, when does it stop being a religion and start being a cult, or a group and start being a cult, is when it becomes difficult to leave, as you said, Yeah. I mean, that's a real thing, because the idea that, like, a lot of religions, like, that's the way that they operate, is that I'm going to give you enough that you want to keep doing this. You're getting a benefit.
And that's where I'm going to tie it into Christian nationalism.
Yes.
Because there's the idea, it's like, no, this is a nation of Christians. Well, what do you do with the people that aren't Christian? Well, you're going to have to bend the knee. What if I don't want to bend the knee? We're going to make you bend the knee, or else. And that has cult written all over it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It does. And, like, cult is such a funny thing because, like, Christianity was the cult of Christianity.
Yeah. It's all a cult.
Eons ago.
Yeah.
And that's how it works. It's people want something, a structure.
Yeah.
I fully believe that.
Yes.
People want a structure. They want, not necessarily, like, with a lot of religions, it's like, the divine reward at the end of a life well lived.
They want a sense of meaning behind the life that, like, we've talked about this before on the podcast. You go and work a fucking job that doesn't give a shit about you.
And also, for a lot of people, morality is hard to explain without that.
Yeah.
It's an, I'll quote Marx here, it's an opiate of the masses.
Yeah.
And that's what it is. Because I would also, if you look back at, basically medieval Europe.
Said the guy who started his own religion in the 20th century, practically. But keep going.
Fair enough. If you look at medieval Europe, you were not able to leave that group that you were born into. And the consequence, if you attempted to do so, was death. So was all of Europe just a giant cult during that time? I think that most people would say no.
No.
Because it seems like it seems illogical to say that an entire continent of people who, for the most part, they interacted with each other to a degree, but certainly all had their own little fiefdoms, kingdoms, so on and so forth. They all had their own individual places, and yet all had to abide by these very strict rules of a religion that they were not allowed to leave. So, I mean, it meets our criteria of a cult. And yet at the same time, I think, just as thinking of it, in this, more, visual way, it doesn't seem like there were members. It seems like they wanted to belong to it.
I mean, they potentially did want to belong
Some
to
people
it because of the
benefits.
So you could also make the same argument, like, in Middle Eastern countries, and you can kind of like tie those threads together because you're not necessarily allowed to leave Islam if you're in, let's say, Iran. Now, you can at any point like try to do that, and you might get freaking beheaded, just like you would in a feudalistic country. At least in a feudalistic time frame, if you tried to leave the walls of the house, you'd fucking die. Now today you can fucking fly off and go wherever.
You're leading into something right there, and this is a very complicated thing because it deals with like people's need and then like levels of control. So you're dealing with.
I mean, and that's what is a cult.
Yeah.
What is a cult? It's that the overall notion of it. We use the word cult. We use the religion.
Well, this is where I'm answering your question. There's a difference between an authoritarian government country and a cult, because a cult is necessarily not within a certain, like, it has its own border, but it's not necessarily a recognized border. It's not necessarily a nationalistic border.
Say that to Rome.
Yeah.
We're not going to touch Rome.
I would say then that, I mean, I don't disagree with you, but it's that you're also conflating two different terms.
Yeah.
Because the government itself, like you use the analogy of Iran, and I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Iran is a theocracy.
Yeah.
And for the most part, you're not afforded a lot of rights if you're not a member of their Shia religion, their Shia Islam religion. So I do think that that's fair. But at the same time, the things definitely they exist independently of each other. And the modern application of government, the way that we use it, because it used to be that like the religion was the government. So now you've got something like a country of Iran, which very much so has its own government, and the government happens to, or chose to, or however you want to word that, they are aligned with the church. And then you bring that back to the United States, and it's obviously what we're trying to avoid here in 1776.
About Iran, look at 1950s Iran to Iran today. It's
exactly.
Completely different sides of that coin.
Yeah. They have, just like in this country, Iran has they have a distinct government.
Yes.
Which is actually separated from their equivalent of the church.
It is.
And then you have a strong influence, and they intermingle with each other. And that does bring it back to where we kind of originated with this, where in the United States, you have this very distinct government, and now increasingly, I guess you could say, that it's interacting more with our proper church, with the Christian church, with the various different branches of Christianity.
Government has never really existed without it.
Yeah.
Right. To varying degrees.
Been there. We were just in different times. So it's always had that stank of religion. It's changed numerous times over our 300 fucking years, whatever.
250 years?
250 years plus. But it's always been there by the way our country was formed.
Yeah.
For the people that were able to form our country.
Yeah. If you look back at American history, you've got a situation where they very much so they made it a point to emphasize that they wanted to separate from the church, but you'll note that they didn't feel the need to separate from any other type of religion. So it was very much so the dominant religion at the time.
A thing I would say today, in today's era, I feel like religions feel like they're a little bit backed into a corner.
Yeah.
Because they've lost a lot. Like, they have their true believers.
Yeah.
But
they lost the masses.
It's almost like a distillation.
Yeah.
So like wherever they've lost numbers, they've gained ferocity in their belief.
This goes back to, and I find this to be an interesting subject, because I feel like on the one hand, it's that I'll tie it into the argument that I was making, that religions need to deliver. Like, they need a sales pitch. That's really what it is. You're selling something, so you have to sell that. And if you fail to deliver, then you will lose followers, and vicariously you'll lose money, you'll lose all these things. On the flip side, you do see a little bit of a revival of it, and this goes back to the religious right.
Heels in
where
the
we
now.
started. Yeah. It's that people feel like it's being in some way subjugated and so on and so forth, and they have their new modern interpretations. I do find it very interesting that people make the argument today that the founding fathers wanted this country to be a Christian country.
That's a common one.
It's a very common one.
Bizarre.
Yeah, and it's very much so. I mean, my interpretation anyway is that it's very much the opposite of what they said.
Yeah.
Now, they were Christians.
Yeah.
But they also were Christians at a time when you had to be a Christian. It was obligated essentially by law. So, I mean, they were not like really,
Look at the way they wrote the Constitution.
Right.
They don't say God in it at all. They
Yeah.
say, your maker.
Yeah, they went out of their way. It was the age of the Enlightenment.
It was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Science.
Yeah. Yeah. They purposefully avoided all of those terms. And now you see today that there's this pushback against that, obviously because people are disenfranchised. And I would go out on this loop here and say that we replaced that religion that gave you all of your fucking answers. And we have this new religion of American democracy, republicanism, so on and so forth. And over this long period of time that we've had it, 250 years, maybe it's delivered for a time period. I certainly couldn't argue with that, but that today people feel disenfranchised by it. And so now they're looking to something different.
Yeah.
And then trying to substantiate those claims by saying, here's religion, here's this thing, and I'm not going to go against what the founding fathers said. So instead, what I'll say is that they were about it the whole time. And that's an interesting.
We live in an era where everybody has the ability to be loud.
Yeah.
The internet exists.
Yeah.
You can put whatever you want out there and get in front of it, and as many people as will take it.
Yeah.
And the volatile nature of where we are at right now in history is you have one side that wants things to be their own separate authoritarian way.
Yes.
And then this is
Well-
more of like a reaction to that, and it's their own authoritarian, but it's like, oh, it's traditional. It's like the pendulum swings,
It does.
harder with every fucking, with every throw.
Yes.
So we're stuck in this situation now where like guys like us, we're in the middle, and we're seeing like, all right, Christian nationalism, that's kind of fucking bonkers.
Yeah.
Maybe don't do that.
Right.
And then on the other end, you go over there and like, all right, well, you guys are arguing about, giving children, fucking sex changes and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's like, maybe.
It's all just like this is an audio medium, but I'm sitting here like I'm closed in a box.
Yeah.
I'm just like Anchorman. I'm in a glass case, place of emotion.
Yeah.
But it's the fringes when they need to be loud.
Yeah.
And they often are the most loud. Whereas, and this is just the way it typically just works out, the people in the middle who are just trying to do whatever to get to tomorrow.
Yeah.
They don't say anything.
Well, because they don't have the time to say anything.
Right.
That, like when you see anybody who protests, it's like, don't you have a fucking job?
Mm-hmm.
Like, for the love of Christ, like.
Yeah.
Like, this is what you do on your day off?
Yeah, this is what you do? Like, God, I don't have the energy. I love the line from Futurama. And it says, I support and oppose many things, but none strongly enough to pick up a pen.
Yeah.
That's pretty much my mindset in most anything.
It's the truth of the matter, because you got so many people who are kind of just along for the ride.
Yeah.
And they're like, what's happening? And they have their ideas one way or another. And I think I fall into this in a lot of ways, but it's just like, I don't have the energy. And this is very well put, as you put it, Dan. It's like to climb up a hill and die on it.
Yeah.
Or one of these things. I'm trying to figure out what I want to have for dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find the energy to climb out of bed and not fucking go to do a mountain.
And now I have to make up a sign.
Yeah, it's like, fuck that.
Yeah.
And
It does kind of explain what all of their, like when you look at a protest, all of the signs are so poorly done.
Yeah.
Well, they're all in a rush.
Because it really, not for nothing, it's probably people just like us who are like, God damn it, I do want to do this. They're just like a little bit more motivated than
Right, just
ourselves.
slightly more motivated.
So it's like they got out of bed and they drove to the spot and they're like, fuck, I don't have a sign. I gotta stop at the Staples and shout 50.
You know where I had to park like 5 blocks away.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love the idea of the freaking disgruntled protester just shows up.
I came out for this.
Because you're already married to the idea.
15 minutes late. All the other protesters like, where are you? It's like, I had to stop at Staples.
I'm not going to get any of the good signs.
Yeah.
This brings up a very interesting point that I'm kind of checking myself. It's like, yeah, I just It's not that I don't care. It's just I don't have the wherewithal to fucking beat one side or the other in this. Good on you for having that energy, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely don't have that energy. I barely have the energy to do this podcast.
It's such a crazy thing. And like I think more or less like my final thoughts on like how I feel about this. Like I said, like if like believing in God or some system that you have works for you and like brings you peace and allows you to be a better person, like whatever, that's I think that's great for you. Whatever. For me, it's like the whole, well, you know, I don't particularly like regulation, and like now it's religion and government kind of offer up the same thing that I'm not particularly interested in. It's just stop showing up on my door with the watchtower.
How else will you learn it?
Yeah, you got to know what Superman's doing up there.
I'm sorry, it's the same reading pamphlet it's been for the past 20 years.
Oh,
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
That's your mistake, my friend. Don't answer the door.
Well,
Yeah, I don't. We had to get like a doorbell. Nobody goes and answers it.
For a moment, I thought that was the end of it.
And we are laughing because he just started shaking his head at the idea of getting a doorbell.
It sounded.
Nobody has any intention of answering the door.
It was painted as this like insane, outlandish thing. Like, man, the government's making me get a doorbell.
Ridiculous.
it's one of the few moments that I actually wish there was a video camera on you in that
That was so delightful. I really enjoyed that. I really did.
But like, believe what you want. Don't force that shit on me. That's really all I ask.
Treat religion like
Yeah.
your penis. Don't take it out in public and don't shove it down your kid's throat.
Wow. Oh,
He's not wrong.
he's not wrong.
He's out of line, but he's not wrong.
That's a very crass way of putting it. I will double down on what you're saying, Justin, especially in that theocratic sense,
Yeah.
because hierarchies will always tilt towards tyranny.
Yeah.
So when you combine two together, you're doubling the odds that you're going to get a tyrannical government. And so that is the opposite. Now, I've said this on this podcast multiple times.
Yeah.
Classical liberal.
Right,
Don't want anything to
absolutely.
do with
I
that.
feel like I'm lashed down enough. I don't need more lashings.
And as I said at the pretty much the beginning of this episode, I ain't got no fight with a person that just wants to worship freely, be left alone. That was one of the things that
And you have that right to, and God bless you, do that.
that was one of
Whatever.
the things that kind of drove me nuts. Now, I have members of my family that are pretty religious, go to
Yeah.
church. I have no problem with that
Nope.
whatsoever. And they've never forced me to
Nope.
go to church or do any of those things. But when, the lockdowns happened,
Yeah.
one of the things my aunt said is that her mother, my grandmother,
Mm.
would not have understood why she couldn't go to church.
Well,
Coupled with the idea, and that's,
See, not about the remote church.
well, she was
grandmother, so
grandmother.
probably not. No.
Probably not going to be able to figure that out. But when you take that away from somebody that's made it a part
Yes.
of their
Yeah.
daily routine,
It's identity. It's
it's an
identity.
identity.
Yeah.
But it's not something that's so grafted onto it. It's forceful. You have
Right.
to do that.
Right.
That's where my sympathy for those people lie.
I mean,
But-
yeah, I get it. I get that. And that's an excellent example.
It's a to each their own type of thing.
Yeah.
Well,
People should be
yeah.
allowed to make these decisions.
You know what? That's probably a good way to put it. That's at least how I feel about it. Is like,
Yeah, exactly. Worship the way you want to worship.
right.
Yeah.
And as Moses so eloquently put it, don't shove it down my fucking throat.
And yet at the same time, what do? When you see somebody that you know is going to go to hell or to purgatory, is it not your
Right.
obligation to save them?
You know what you tell them? You tell them to subscribe to the Loud and Drunk podcast. Leave us a 5-star review. Check us out on YouTube and Rumble. Make sure that you like, comment, share, and hit that notification bell. Follow us on social media. We are at Loud and Drunk on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Hit us up at our home base, loudanddrunk.com. Catch up on the podcast, merch, all of those great things. So for Justin, Moses, and the Kansas City Chiefs, apparently I have my doubts on that. And
No.
please don't sue us, real Harry Bucker.
You come from me if you're coming.
I'm Dan, and until next time.
Shalom, bitches.
Did I throw you off?